breaking news came out today of Oscar De La Hoya revealing to the public that Canelo Alvarez avoided and still avoiding Charlo to this day. In fact, here is exactly what Oscar De La Hoya had to say, which I quote, "Please, this guy does everything wrong. Head is up when he throws hooks, on his heels, flat-footed. What else? Oh, he avoids twin Charlo." End of the quote. Shortly after, Canelo Alvarez responded by stating, "Oh really? You want me to talk? Effing traitor. Do me a favor and go F yourself." With that being said, one thing that stood out, you see Oscar De La Hoya pointing out flaws he see in Canelo. More importantly, Oscar De La Hoya finally admits that Canelo is avoiding Charlo. On the other hand, Canelo responded without disagreeing with anything Oscar De La Hoya said. He never said, "I fight anybody. I'm not ducking Charlo. I fight him tomorrow." He said none of these things. All he did was call Oscar De La Hoya a traitor. Why? Because Oscar want Canelo to fight Charlo, which to Canelo, that's betrayal. Because in his mind, why does Oscar want to throw me in there in the lion's den and see me get beat, possibly? I thought you were supposed to protect me. This is Canelo Alvarez mindset. Which, like I always say, three things that can never ever be hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. They will always come out. And now you guys hearing the truth directly from Canelo Alvarez former promoter, Oscar De La Hoya, as he spilled the beans on Canelo Alvarez duck print of ducking any black undefeated American fighter, since that happened to be his kryptonite. And before I go further, let's go ahead and debunk the dustiest excuse from the Canelo Alvarez fans, since they an open book. We can read their excuses a mile away. Just peep the comment section. Every time you see a comment that says Oscar De La Hoya is hating, he's salty that Canelo Alvarez left him. Anytime you see a comment like that, that's decaf alert. Because see, the reality is, if Oscar De La Hoya is revealing the truth on Canelo Alvarez ducking Charlo and giving up his belt to do so, now that he's no longer Canelo Alvarez promoter, that means Oscar De La Hoya had to keep his mouth sealed when he was Canelo Alvarez promoter. That's why he couldn't air Canelo out on ducking Charlo then. But obviously Oscar De La Hoya is free to do so now, since he has no obligations to protect Canelo Alvarez's image of ducking all of the undefeated black American fighters, as Oscar is no longer Canelo Alvarez protector / promoter. See, Canelo can no longer use Oscar De La Hoya as a shield to defend himself for being the face of the ducks in the sport of boxing, since he is the pioneer of the NBF Witness Protection franchise. Canelo Alvarez started a duck organization franchise in order to avoid Charlo. This is how it all began. Second of all, Oscar De La Hoya, he promotes like he fought. Oscar De La Hoya fought the best, unlike Canelo Alvarez, who ducks the best. Oscar De La Hoya, he wanted to make the Charlo fight. Oscar De La Hoya also wanted to make the Andrade fight. Oscar De La Hoya wanted to make these fights as Canelo Alvarez promoter. In fact, when Oscar was still promoting Canelo Alvarez, he stated that in order for Canelo to be one of the Mexican greats, he has to fight the likes of Andrade and Charlo. Those are the fights that he wants to make happen, and they will happen. He also added that he's all about making the best versus the best.
I think that fight will happen in the future. Canelo will fight anybody. He's we have our plan. We know what we want to do. I think Canelo and Charlo will be a terrific fight in the future.
And Oscar, how's Canelo against the likes of Jacobs, Andrade, and Charlo? How's he going to beat these 6-foot athletic middleweights when Canelo's 5'9"? You know,
we'll see when he fights them. I mean, and mark my words, he will fight them. I mean, Canelo wants to be great. He wants to be great. So in order to be great, you have to fight the likes of the Jacobs, the Charlos. Everybody depends for that.
This is what Oscar De La Hoya stated as Canelo Alvarez promoter. However, shockingly in return, Canelo responded to Oscar by stating, "You are not loyal," as Canelo turned around and turned down $40 million guaranteed, his highest purse of his career. Canelo Alvarez, that is, in order to avoid Demetrius Andrade for undisputed. The same thing he's trying to accomplish today in the European division, as Canelo trying to divide the sport, where if you black, you don't get to fight him since you're not in his division. And when I say division, I mean you got to be the right complexion. If you not white, you ain't right. This is exactly the WBC franchise designation, where Canelo Alvarez is the entrepreneur of that plan. You see Oscar De La Hoya wanting to make the best versus the best, since Canelo wanted to be undisputed at 160. That was his dream and a goal that he set out for himself.
Putting the fact that he's fighting in June aside, can you give me your thoughts about the possibility of a fight against Demetrius Andrade and the prospect of becoming the undisputed champion?
Sí, no, el que tenga el título, eso es lo que queremos el título, y pues obviamente ese es el objetivo, ¿no? Vamos a sentarnos con nuestro equipo a ver qué es lo que viene, pero el objetivo es ganar los 4 títulos en peso medio.
Yes, that's the goal. Look, whoever has the title, doesn't matter. Our goal is to unify all the belts, become the undisputed middleweight champion of the world.
However, Canelo refused to fight both Andrade and Charlo. What kind of fighter that allows a color of a person to stop him from accomplishing his dream? And Canelo has the audacity to claim he's the best in the world when he is not even the best in his division. In fact, he also gave up his belt to Jermall Charlo, who was his mandatory for 2 years by that point. Would you guys believe Canelo paid sectioning fees for witness protection from the WBC franchise designation in order to duck Jermall Charlo and be protected? What a shame. The first fighter in history, Canelo Alvarez, that gave up his belt, the pride of Mexico City, to his mandatory Jermall Charlo in order to avoid a fight with him, while requesting to create a witness protection organization, No Black Fighters Witness Protection franchise. This is exactly the definition of a fake champion that will give up his belt in order to duck a fight that the whole world want to see, including the baddest man on the planet, Mike Tyson. But Canelo, he'd rather fight the Avinis of the world. He'd rather defend his title against his mandatory Avini Yildirim that he personally requested. However, when his mandatory is Charlo, Canelo rather gives up his belt instead, which is a sign of a fake champion, with the facts being laid out on the table. Regardless of what Oscar De La Hoya says, the truth will always remain the same. The facts will never change. In this incident, the only thing Oscar De La Hoya is doing is co-signing the facts and the truth that new media's Akhi been reporting from day one. In all reality, what Oscar De La Hoya did was put more light on the truth so more people could see the truth. Then it's up to you to decide what you're going to do with that information. The truth will either set you free or burn your emotional soul. Therefore, don't hate Oscar. Oscar did what he was supposed to do as a fighter. He fought the best. As a promoter, he tried to make the best fights happen. You guys should hate what Canelo Alvarez is doing and encourage Canelo Alvarez to grow some cojones since he putting in a bad rep on Mexico, period. It took Benavidez to come save the day like Superman. But the bad news for the Canelo fans is that you can't even use Benavidez to save face for Canelo. By trying to deflect, Canelo avoiding Demetrius Andrade and Charlo for the past 7 years, till this day, to Charlo avoiding Benavidez as of late. The bad news is Canelo is also avoiding Benavidez as well. In fact, he requested to fight Avni Yildirim coming off a loss for Benavidez belt. But Canelo wouldn't fight the undefeated Benavidez. For the people that don't know, when Benavidez was still a champion, his team reached out to Canelo Alvarez the moment he arrived to 168. Not once, but twice, as Canelo turned down both fights. Few moments later, when Benavidez lost his belt on the scale due to miscalculating weight, Canelo went and stole Benavidez's belt. That's right. Canelo is a thief in the sport of boxing. I mean, who goes and steal someone's championship belt? What kind of champion is that? So, Canelo fans, you guys cannot use Benavidez to save face for Canelo. You could definitely use Benavidez to save face for Mexico, since Canelo lit the country down. But you cannot use Benavidez to save face for Canelo, since Canelo is ducking Benavidez while they both are in the same division. At least Charlo is a division below Benavidez. Furthermore, see, Canelo Alvarez is like a duplicate version of Ryan Garcia. The only difference between Canelo and Ryan is that Canelo found a way out to duck all of the Fabulous Four of his time. On the other hand, Ryan couldn't find a way to duck all of the Fabulous Four of his time. That's why he claimed anxiety. But Canelo, on the other hand, he actually found a way out, and he's still ducking the Fabulous Four of his time to this day. The Fabulous Four of Canelo time happened to be Demetrius Andrade and both of the Charlo twins. That's right, when it comes to Canelo Alvarez, a lot of people seem to forget that Andrade and the Charlo twins, including Canelo, all campaigned in the same division, 154, for years, as Canelo was beltless, and both Charlo and Andrade had belts. However, Canelo refused to fight them since 7 years ago to this day. Canelo, in fact, avoided Jermall Charlo as well, as he caused Golden Boy to lose Jermall, since Golden Boy promised Jermall Charlo that he was going to land a Canelo Alvarez fight. However, Canelo cherry-picked Kirkland coming off a 1.5 year layoff instead, which Jermall ended up leaving Golden Boy after that. Which is exactly why Canelo is the face of the Ducks in the sport of boxing, officially known as the European Assassin. With the facts being laid out, it's not just Oscar De La Hoya that co-signed this message. There's also dozens of trainers, fighters, and even legends co-signing this message. So if Oscar De La Hoya is hating, was Crawford hating too when he pointed out the fact that Canelo is ducking all of the undefeated Black American fighters? Was Chavez Sr. hating when he criticized Canelo for doing the same thing? Eric Morales, Barrera, Marquez, Hopkins, were all of these legends hating for telling the truth? If you let the Canelo Alvarez fans tell it, they are. They satisfied with Canelo fighting Avni Yildirim coming off a loss and all these other Europeans. They don't want to see the best versus the best because they a fan of Canelo, not a fan of the sport. They don't want to see the best versus the best because that means Canelo can lose. to Charlo or Andrade. They do not want to face the fear if Canelo loses. They rather get a guaranteed victory instead, which makes these fans emotional fans. A fan of a fighter, not the sport. And what makes matter worse is that old media is just as emotional, which is exactly why they push their agenda in order to protect the hopeless fighters from the coincidentalist fighters. And for the people that want to say, oh, you say Canelo don't fight black fighters, he fought Jacob. Well, first of all, Jacob is not undefeated. Jacob have been knocked out before and beat in a worse fashion than Canelo did, which is why Canelo fought Jacob to begin with. Jacob also made it clear that he did not want to fight Andrade. However, on the other hand, Andrade made it clear he always wanted to fight Jacob. Plus, Jacob told Charlo to his face that he touching M's. He's not worried about Charlo when Charlo was trying to fight him as well. So again, you see Canelo picking on the weakest link and only had enough cojones to claim he was the best in the world once he moved out of the 160-pound division to a European division. And last but not least, for the people that may say, Oscar stated that Charlo turned down a fight with Canelo Alvarez. He overpriced himself. First of all, Charlo said that was a cap, and Oscar De La Hoya comments today prove that. It's clear as day that Oscar De La Hoya said that back in the day due to strings attached. Because if there was any validation to that, wouldn't you think Canelo Alvarez would have checked Oscar De La Hoya by responding with, how am I avoiding Charlo when he turned down a fight with me? Bingo. Instead, Canelo never sent Charlo an offer. All we know is that Al Heyman offered a Charlo fight to Canelo, and Canelo turned it down. Which this seems to be another lie by Team Canelo. Just like they lied about sending Benavidez an offer, in which Benavidez also said that was a lie. But more importantly, if Charlo turned down a fight with Canelo, then how did Charlo end up with Canelo Alvarez's belt? And he still has it till this day. I can guarantee you none of the decafs is going to answer that question, because they know if Charlo turned down a fight with Canelo, then Canelo would have kept his belt instead of being forced to surrender his belt to Charlo. This alone proves 1000% that Charlo never turned down a fight with Canelo Alvarez. Plus, that's the fight Charlo have been chasing for years. Furthermore, for the people that may say, how come you believe what Oscar De La Hoya said today, but you don't believe what Oscar De La Hoya said in the past? Obviously, Oscar De La Hoya was Canelo Alvarez's promoter at that time. So he will say anything to save face for Canelo Alvarez while trying to push him to fight the best. You see Oscar De La Hoya defending Ryan Garcia for ducking Devin Haney today. It was the same thing when it came to Canelo Alvarez. He's being paid to stay on code and do what he's told. However, today, there's no stipulation, so Oscar De La Hoya is free to tell the truth and air out Canelo Alvarez for his duckish moves. More importantly, regardless of what Oscar De La Hoya says, we go by the facts, we go by the truth. And what Oscar De La Hoya is saying today goes hand to hand with the truth. With that being stated, drop your thoughts in the comment section below. Subscribe below and click on the notification bell to be continued on the next episode of Akhi, Akhi TV. Peace, and I'm on to the next one.
How did you choose Lomachenko? Because
I did not choose him. He requested, Canelo requested. So we sent out a vote and we analyzed his history.
Ooh, Canelo and Lomachenko requested?
Absolutely.
Ooh, you just made headlines.
Lomachenko,
You just made headlines.
Lomachenko, top rank, requested. And let me tell you, we analyzed the request. Top of the top.
Define the franchise belt. Can you define it?
The franchise is not a belt, it's not a championship, it's a designation given to...
Last man even said they doing that to protect him.
Right.
Somebody beat him, but they don't get a belt.
There you go.
The franchise belt is protect them from the big black guys.